So continuing on with our discussion of mortgages, remember we talked about what a mortgage was, the different vocabulary involved with mortgages, as well as types of mortgages. We're now going to just move on to some mortgage calculations that you need to be familiar with, and they're going to be based on fixed rate mortgages, not the variable rate where the interest rate fluctuates. And it's going to be based on per month, not every second week. So that's what our calculations are going to be based on. And just like we did when we talked about interest and paying and personal loans, we used a table that calculated for us how much we should be paying back per a certain amount every month. So we're going to use a similar table for mortgages. So the first example, Conrad purchases a home for $220,000, makes a down payment of $40,000, takes out a fixed rate mortgage, 2.5%, which is a good rate. And the mortgage, he's going to spread it out over 20 years. But remember, even though you spread your mortgage out over 20 years, you take certain terms, certain blocks within that 20 years, right? So you would do a 5-year term, and then you do another 5-year term, and another 5-year term, and another 5-year term to make 20 years. Okay, and every time you may have a different interest rate. So we want to determine his monthly mortgage payment. So we need to use that amortization or payback table on the next page. First of all, we need to figure out his loan. Okay, so the money he's actually going to borrow. So amount borrowed. How would I find that? Yeah, 220 minus 40,000, because he's able to put that towards the house. He's got to take a loan out or a mortgage out for $180,000. Now we got to use the table to figure out how much is he paying per month. For every $1,000, remember this payback table is every $1,000 that he borrows. Okay, so we go to 2.5%. He's spread out the loan over 20 years. So we're looking at, he's going to pay $5.29 for every $1,000 he borrows. Okay. So using the table, .5%, 20 years is $5.29 per $1,000 that he borrows. But he's borrowing 180 of those. So we have to multiply 529 by 180. So his monthly payment is $5.29 times 180,000, which gives us $952.20. That's how much he has to pay per month. The second part of this question, we want to calculate the amount of interest he pays over the 20 years. So let's say he took 5-year terms. So he would take 4 of them. And let's say he got the exact same interest rate every time. Okay. How much would he have ended up paying in interest over the 20 years? Well,
remember, this amount here includes the principal and the interest. Okay, so part of this is going to what he actually borrowed. Part of it is going to, like a small part of it, is going to charging him for borrowing the money. Okay, so 20 years, I need to convert that to months to figure out how much he's going to pay in total. So how would I calculate that? I would just do times 12, 240 months. So he's going to pay $952.20 every month for 240 months. So altogether, and this is the principal, the $180,000 he borrowed, and interest, would be 240 times 952.20, which gives us $228,528. $180,000 of which is the amount that he borrowed, which means the remainder must be the amount of interest they charged him over the 20 years. Okay, so the interest alone will be how much he paid in both 228,528 minus his original loan, 180,000. So this is principal and interest. For this is just the principal. So he ends up paying $48,528. That's how much it costs him to borrow $180,000 and pay it back over 20 years. Okay. And remember, this is being paid out over 20 years. So it's, even though the interest rate was 2.5%, you're still going to be paying interest. If he did a 15-year payback period, would you expect this to be lower or higher? Lower, right? Because he took less time. He's not going to pay as much interest. The interest would probably go up a little bit with a lower, no, actually it wouldn't. I don't believe it would, so I'm not going to say that. Okay. Another thing that you need to be familiar with is a table like this, where we need to calculate, like we're going to take his loan, we know how much he pays per month, we're going to break that down into, okay, that amount that he pays per month, how much is interest, how much goes towards the principal. So to do that, remember, he starts off with, before he even pays anything back, $180,000. That's the unpaid balance before anything is calculated. Remember what I said about owner's equity? That's the value he has in his home right now. How much value does he have in his home right now? No, that's what he has to pay back. But did he make a down payment? $40,000. So of the $220,000, because he put $40,000 in, that's his equity right now. As this goes down, this is gonna go up. Because as he keeps paying and paying and paying and paying, his value in the house will go up. The payment, we've already calculated from the table. It's going to be the same, $952.80 every month. $952.80 every month. That doesn't change. What will change, though, is how much of that is going towards the principal and how much is being charged for interest. So what we've got to do is we need to figure out his interest. Like, how much of the $952.80 is he putting towards interest? Well, his interest rate is 2.5%, right? So to calculate his interest, we would take the amount that he's paying, 2.5% of that is going towards interest. And remember, this 2.5% is per year. So we've got to divide 12 to get the monthly interest he's paying. Oh, really? What? 52.20. Yeah. 952.20, sorry. Oh, shit. Oh. Thank you. 952.20. 952. There. Let's fix this. 52.20. So that works out to $375. So that's this amount right here in this cell. $375. So he's paying a pretty significant chunk of the $952.20 towards interest. Now we got to figure out, okay, if he's paying this amount of the $952.20 for interest, how much is he putting back towards the actual loan he took? Well, how would we calculate that? Wouldn't we just do $952.20? $952.20 minus how much you pay for interest. And we get $577.20. That's what goes here. So we've broken down the $952.20 for the first payment. This is the first month. $375 is going to interest, the amount he's getting charged to borrow. $577.20 is actually going towards the loan. So how do we calculate his unpaid balance now? Well, how much is he put towards the loan? This amount. This amount, right? So he's put that amount. So to figure out how much he still has left to pay, starting the next end of the next month, we do 180,000 minus the 577.20 he paid. And we get 179,000. $179,422.80. So he's paid a little bit towards his principal. And finally, remember, when he puts this towards his principal, that increases the amount that he owes the house by the same amount. So therefore, I'll just use blank.
Therefore, to figure out his new owner's equity, it's how much he has at stake in the house now, plus how much he paid to the principal, which gives us 40,577.20. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's not 952.20. It's the total 180,000. It's my mistake. Because it's interest calculated on the entire loan, not just that month. We divide by 12 to figure out that month. So that's how we got 375. And now we've got to repeat the same thing for the next two payments. So, but remember, how much is his loan now? It's this amount, right? It's no longer 180. So when we calculate the red, we're going to use 179,428 and 80 cents to figure out how much is going towards his interest. So for the interest for this month, well, his loan is now down to 179,422.80. I times that by the interest rate, 0.025. And to get it per month, I divide it by 12. And I get $373.80. 373.80. Which makes sense because he paid down part of his loan, a little bit, the first month. So that means he's going to be charged a little less interest because the loan isn't as big the second month. So it's going to be a little less, which means the amount he actually puts back to what he borrows is going to be a little bigger. So to figure out this new blue amount, we take 952.20 minus how much he paid in interest that month. And we get 578.40. Which means this goes to 578.40. So every month after that, his interest that he puts in is going to be a little less, and the amount he puts back towards his principal is going to be a little more. So how much does he owe now? Well, we take the 179,422.80 and subtract how much he put towards interest or towards the principal that month. 578.40. And we get 178, 844 and 40 cents. Which means he's put a little bit more value, his own value, into the home. How much more has he put in? Well, he currently has 40,577.20. He added another 578.40 towards his principal. So this would be 40,000 577.20 plus 578.40. Which means the equity he now has in his home is 41,155.60. So again, you see what happens every month. He pays a little less interest that month, which means he pays a little bit more back towards his principal, which means the amount of his loan comes down a little bit, which means his value in the house goes up a little bit. So again, we would just repeat that process for the last one using these numbers in the second column. I'm not going to show the calculation here, but to figure out his interest for the third payment, the third month, we do the value of his loan, 178.8440, times 0.025, divide 12. So the third payment he pays $372.59. So pays a little bit less again, which means he's paying a little bit more towards his principal. How much more? The difference between these two. So this subtract this will tell me how much he's putting back towards the loan. And that amount works out to $579.61. So we put $570.69 towards the loan, which means we take it away from this amount to get the new loan amount, and we add it to this amount to get his new equity amount. So 178,844.40 minus how much you put towards the principal of that payment gives us 178,264.79. We also add that amount to his equity to get 41,735.21. You could be asked, like you could be given a table like this and be asked to complete missing information. Seen that on old provincial exams before. And so like if he decided to sell right now, okay, and let's say he was able to sell it for 220,000, okay, his amount that he would get back is 41,735.21. He'd have to pay this back to the bank for the loan, okay, so he made like a little less than $2,000 if he sold it for the same amount. Obviously, that's not really worth it. Okay, but you can see over the long run, okay, the money that you put into the house, your owner's equity is going to increase, while the loan is going to decrease, which means that if you sell, okay, you're going to be making a little bit more money, assuming that you sell for at least the same price. Okay, last question. And this is based on this data that we just filled in. So we want to calculate the total amount he pays in the first 3 months. Well, how much does he pay per month? And then times 3. First 3 payments gives us $28.56. 56.
And remember, of that 2856, part of it is the interest, which we calculated. Part of it is paying back the loan, the principal amount, which we calculated. Calculate the total amount of interest he pays. Well, just go to the interest column, right? So read the three amounts on the interest column. It would be 375 plus 373. 373.80 plus 372.59, which would be 1121.39. And finally, we want to calculate the amount by which the unpaid balance or the mortgage, the loan, has been reduced. So going back to the table, well, we started at what? What did the loan start at? 180. How much is the loan now after three payments? That's what we have to subtract away. That would be the unpaid balance. 178,264.79. And that will tell us how much the loan is being reduced by, and that was 1735.21. And that amount has gone into his house. So it's increased his owner's equity. So these are just some of the calculations. You see, I mean, the math itself is relatively straightforward, but the tables can get a little bit complicated.